Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching 72 News. This is Shoaib Zaidi, and today we have our regular weekly Monday show. Today, weekly Monday show is very exclusive. The reason for this one that we have the International Farming Day. However, we always know that there is a big protest happened last Saturday, and it's my opportunity and my honor that I have two special guests, one from India, basically American, and one from Australia. Let me start. Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Bernard Malik. Thank you very much, Professor Grant Pittman. Let me start from Dr. Bernard Malik. Before starting, I'd like to inform that India agriculture is the most important sector of the Indian economy. Indian agriculture sector accounts for 18% of the Indian gross domestic product (GDP) and provides employment of the 50% of the country-wide workforce. What does it mean that at this moment the farming issue is basically hit, and India is the number one after China is agricultural country. So I would like to know first from Dr. Bernard Malik, this is the value of the farming in the international sector for India farmers. What happened there and why this protest and farming and farmer support, and similarly 72 News special program, Our Farmers, Our Future. This is mostly based on the farmers, but especially based on the Indian farmers. Yes, Mr. Malik, thank you very much, sir. Sir, what do you think that India GDP 18% involved in because of the farming and 50% of the workforce is from the farming? What happens there? What exactly happening?
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi. The issue that is being discussed today is so important and critical to most of the people. 1.3 billion population is currently witnessing a huge demonstration in Delhi, and all over the world it's been displayed in different countries. In 1979, India decided to go for green revolution when world was doing industrial revolution, and that was to provide food and generate enough food so no one goes hungry in India.
Right.
And the laws were passed in 1979 to facilitate that. So they decided to create local farming markets, what you basically go with called mandis.
Mandis.
Yeah, and that system was extremely successful. Everything was fine. We're working well. No one goes hungry in India because we produce enough food. What happened in September this year was Modi government brought in 3 bills, and they were passed with voice vote, without discussion with any of the stakeholders being agriculture according to Indian constitution is a concurrent domain between states and center.
Right.
And states were never consulted on that one, and center went ahead and unilaterally just approved those laws and got them passed in one day. And those laws were to deregulate what was already going on in the agriculture sector. Also, in that laws, the biggest people got affected was the farming community.
Farming community, yes.
Correct. And they were also not consulted in this process. After the laws were passed, Punjab generally that contributes close to 20% of the national wheat and 38% of the rice,
right,
to the nation, is football of India.
Right.
Went out and started protesting. For nearly 3 months, they sat in Jalandhar, Amritsar, and other places protesting and trying to get government attention from center because federal government passed those laws.
Right.
Unfortunately, no one listened. They didn't even care. So they decided to go to Delhi. And what I feel in India is a mature democracy, but every now and then you get people that have no respect for democracy in power. Though they use the democratic means to get to power, they have no respect for democratic values. Having said that, when people started going from Punjab, Haryana, that's the next state between Delhi and Punjab,
right,
where the government belongs to BJP and BJP government also rules in the center, decided to obstruct their way to Delhi. They dug out roads were literally dug out, police was put in there to stop them, water cannons were put on them, road hurdles were put, big blocks were put in to block them, people were beaten up. So government used every trick in the book to block this from proceeding to Delhi, and
Right.
they used cruel force to block these farmers going to Delhi. And as you would know, and your viewers would know, Punjabis are very resilient people.
Absolutely.
So they fought with very strong determination. They made their way. Government gave up at the end because there was a lot of protest from within Haryana from people. And police was very supportive of farmers because at the end of day, we all belong to farming communities and we are connected somehow or the other. And
everyone, all of us is connected to the farmers.
That's right. Punjab and Haryana, technically 90-95% people are connected to farmers. Either we do farming as laborers or we do farming as growers, as farmers. So there is some connection through somebody in the family, if not directly. So we can feel for it.
Malik Sahab, I will come back to you and find it out that this is the first time that some steps or strong or again, a step has been taken against the farmers. Just I like to take some notes from Professor Grant Pittman and ultimately Professor Grant Pittman. Thank you very much from 72 News. Professor Grant Pittman, Australia, farming has a 3% of GDP. India has 18% of GDP. India has almost 50% of employment. However, Australia has 1.6 million people engaged in the farming. Now, because you are engaged in the policies, you involve in the policies, we will go in detail later on. But at this moment, I like to know, with your experience, what value you believe farming has?
Look, I think Australia has similar problems to India in many ways. We have state governments that have pretty much looked after the agricultural industry for probably 100 years perhaps, and now the federal government has played an intervention strategies more and more.
Right.
And as such, there's the dynamics between the federal government and the state government on agriculture and looking at efficiencies, trying to increase the production and looking at supplies, particularly global supplies. And so what Dr. Bernard was talking about is not unusual here in Australia. And certainly there have been cases where the wool industry has not been happy about wool prices. Sugarcane, similar issue. In more recent times, cattle have been a critical issue, and wheat. So the issue is, how much does government get involved in the freedom to farm approach?
Right.
Or should they even be involved? And the issue is, how do you manage the states who have their own interests against the national interests? And then we also have our large cities now, which are perhaps a little distant from the rural sector.
Yes.
And have the biggest voting bloc. And so their interests aren't about the farmers quite as much. They're more interested about roads and trains and transport and medical. And so there's a political indifference between the country people and the city people now. And sadly, even in my home state, and Dr. Bernard's very much aware of this, many of our agricultural educational centres have been closed. And Dr. Bernard has one of the few institutes in Queensland that specialise in this area. And the research, in a meeting we attended the other day, the scientists have been closed down, and the specialists in academia have been reduced dramatically, so that the people who could support farmers have diminished dramatically in the last decade or two. So we have very similar problems to India, but of course we have a greater reliance on mining now and on tourism, and also research centres into technology and sciences. So we're probably diversified a bit more. But going back, say, 30 or 40 years ago, we were not dissimilar to India, where our major export and usage was in the agricultural industry.
So it means that in 30, 40 years, there was a big shift from the farming to the from agriculture to the industries.
That's correct. The miners came into Australia, and of course, we're very plentiful with iron ore, with coal, with bauxite, all the great minerals needed to grow cities. And governments have decided to tax those, so they make more money out of the taxing of the minerals than they do out of agriculture. So they're more supportive of the mining industry because of the wealth it creates.
Thank you.
Agriculture has been put on the side.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Pittman. Mr. Malik Saab, Professor Pittman, he mentioned a few good points. Number one, government engagement or involvement in the farming, which is not directly in other sectors like in farming. How you are looking this involvement? And as I earlier mentioned, that do you think that this is the first time government go strong and make some rules and go for parliament, or it happened in the past also and then it was handled in the similar way, or this is the first time?
I think this is the first time. Farmers have been considered a big vote bank. And no government could ever afford to piss them off, basically. So they always kept them in good humor. We have had demonstrations like this before in 1984, or no, 1986 or something, when Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister. Something happened like this, but it was not like this. This time, it's a total indifference of the government. And especially in winter now, it's very cold out there. People are just camped out on the roads. Over 100,000 tractors and trolleys are parked on the roadside. People don't have a cozy bed to sleep in. It is not warm. But interestingly, the people themselves have come out to feed these people. They don't have proper toilet facilities. They don't have proper places to take bath. And when they go and protest, police treats them bad. And government's indifference is to a level where it is arrogance. Okay, oh, if you can't do it, we'll do it after 10 days. What government is trying to do is, by keeping these people too long there, they would run away. They would just wither away, get tired and go. But I think what government is failing to notice is this is not the same breed that they have dealt with other places. Punjabis would die for their motherland's rights. And farming is so dear to them. I don't know if you have seen the figures during freedom struggle. 90% of the sacrifices, people who were hung or martyred, were Punjabis. That's a massive number.
Right.
So sacrifice and Qurbani is in our blood.
Malik Saab, here I'd like to add one note, because many viewers, people are still confused. Some of the people, they still don't understand exactly what happened. Law, you already mentioned. According to this law, what the farmers are going to lose? What exactly they are going to lose? Because I like to know that our farmers are our future. Does it is really true that our farmers are our future?
Absolutely. If there are no farmers, we would our people will starve. And look, if 1 billion people or 1.3 billion people don't have food to eat, what would happen? Look at the law and order situation. Look at the social implication. Look at the criminal implications of that thing. We already know what happens in failed states like Venezuela and other countries, in some of the countries in Africa. India was run really beautifully. They say, why spoil a good thing if it is not wrong? I don't know why government went out. Government is considered to be pro-corporate and run by the corporate.
Right.
So people are very unhappy.
So in this law, the corporate going to be handle the the farming area, and they will decide the pricing of farmers?
Yeah, interestingly, see, there is a trick to it. What they have said that mandi, that is MSP, the minimum support price, will not change. But what's going to happen is these corporate companies who have billions of dollars, unlimited supply of money, would come in and take a farmer's wheat or whatever, grains, food grains, at a higher price. So what would happen? That will drive the people out of the local market, the small people who sell who buy the wheat. So the mandis would probably go out of business in year one.
Right.
So what would happen next year is once mandis are out of business, the same corporate people will come and buy your wheat cheaper than what was bought last year or year before, because now there is no competition. So that is why these farmers are upset that slowly, if our wheat is being sold at lower than the minimum support price that government used to do before, right? Then these people, 80% of them are less than 5 acres of land, so they will become laborers in their own land.
Right.
So what we're basically working is you labor and get a little bit of money to survive, because the corporations have taken your right to have a better price.
Right. Just connecting to the same concept, Professor Grant Pittman, Mr. Malik mentioned that the corporate is going to fix the price. You've been involved in the policies, the procedures of the governments. Now, coming back to the farmers, and you already mentioned in 30, 40 years, the things change a lot. Being a country you would like to develop. Now, my question will remain same with you. Our farmers is very future. Mr. Malik, because he's looking from the Indian farmers and their problems. Australia engagement of farming is 3%. What you think really that our farmers is our future is a right slogan, or with the 30, 40 years, what change shows that it's not true now? We have to change the concept.
Again, I think Australia has probably got similar problems to India in policy. Certainly the big corporations now are taking over the small farms and regulating the price. And when I go to shop for groceries now, I used to buy a mango for 20 cents. Now I pay $3.50 for a mango. When I was buying bananas, it was about 50 cents a kilo. Now I pay $3.50 a kilo. So where's the price gone up? Have we added more to the supply chain who makes more cuts? Or is it the big corporations maximizing their financial returns, and the smaller farmers who could do it perhaps more profitably because they ran more as a family business may have been cut out of the food chain arrangements or food production chain arrangement. So Australia has similar issues. The thing in Australia, though, is we have enough food to cover our people. The issue for government here is how much do we want to help the rest of the world? We have a lot of land that's capable of being farmed. We have some of the best land in the world according to scientific research. We are short of water, but what more good could we do to help countries like India with fresh vegetables or whatever at very low prices? That's a decision governments here are grappling with.
Professor Pittman, you also mentioned about the financials. In policy, do you think that the tax brackets and tax returns also applicable for the farmers in the same way like a normal man, or they have the different? Number one. Second part is that, as you mentioned, that there is a huge land is empty, and ultimately government is making some special policies and packages for the farmers. So that ultimately going to help them?
If you go back here in Australian agricultural industry, and you're only saying 30, 40 years ago, there were significant tax benefits given to farmers, and there were fuel excises and all sorts of things that the farmer could get. a lot of that has changed, and the government has argued that farmers need to be more efficient, use technology, use scientific production methods and plants. So they're saying that the farmer has an obligation to use what's available to deliver their product, and that the government doesn't need to subsidise them anymore. So what occurred 30, 40 years ago has probably diminished dramatically for the farmers. But of course, the big corporate farmers, you're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of revenue. So they have a bigger say than the farmer who only makes a couple $100,000 a year.
Yes.
Right. Malik Sahab, same thing. Does in India, the Indian farmers has a special packages in terms of tax returns or any other privilege they have?
Yes. Farmers were always considered a royal class in the sense that they got benefits from the state governments. As I said, it's state and federal concurrent domain. And a lot of states had gone and relaxed the rules for farmers. So most of the time, farmers did not have to pay the electricity bill for their commercial farming or the motors they were using, the tube wells they were using, they didn't have to pay the bills. And the system that supported the farmers was poor farmers could go to Arthia, the middleman, and borrow money for their daily needs.
Right.
And pay it off at the end of year or whenever the harvest came around. And the system worked beautifully. Consider this, the Indian government doesn't have the resources and the manpower to help these people. They established cooperative banks, but cooperative banks had their own set of rules and laws that did not always help farmers. So this was a private system which was working perfect. And
it was a private system.
Yes. The insensitivity and the indifference of this government to accept what was working well is really, really disheartening. And please, I do not know if you noticed, we held a very big protest here in Brisbane.
Yes.
It's it's considered as one of the biggest demonstration of support to over 1 million people that are camped in Delhi, in Australia. Brisbane is a very small city, but people came out, and you should have seen as you were there.
Yeah.
Gosh, the sentiments of people.
What exactly bring them? Because I learned from the different newspaper and channels that was the biggest protest in all over the world, in overseas.
Yes.
So what exactly brought them?
It's their okay, how to put it? What brought them was their own.
Because they did not, if you allow me, we find less number in Sydney, Melbourne and other areas in US also. So that's why I'm trying to see that exactly what brought them other than Bernard Malik.
People's sensitivity to it. See, agriculture, I was telling somebody day before yesterday, agriculture is in our blood, it is in our DNA. We feel for it. People have identified with the cause. And what brought people out there, and I do not know if you saw, there were 2-year-old kids holding signs and there were 80-year-old farmers who were holding signs. What brought people out there was government's cruelty in blocking these people's way to Delhi. You can't be cruel. Delhi is a national capital. Anybody who wants to go. And it is a right, or rather a birthright within the democratic system to go and protest peacefully. These people have been protesting peacefully. Why block it? A government that considers itself democratically elected should not violate people's right to protest peacefully. And I think the way these farmers were treated, they were hit, the ways were blocked, the water was thrown on them in this winter season there in India. People felt, gosh, what's happening? They felt revolted. So it's kind of revolt. I just hope and pray that this ends peacefully. Considering this government is very notorious, they might do something to these people. So I apprehend some notorious elements being brought in by the government to create some panic or to cause some damage or death to these people. And then I think it would all get out of control. The heads of states, for the first time, the Prime Minister of Canada came out in support. And the External Affairs Ministry, the Foreign Ministry of India, called in their ambassador to put him on notice and say he shouldn't be doing it. But it is shameful that a prime minister of another country can feel what is happening in India, but our prime minister cannot feel.
Right. Malik Sahab, I will come back to you and find out that does these kind of protests will really going to impact, and if yes, then how? Professor Grant Pittman, it's just an awkward question. If you see last 30-40 years, the salary increase of a doctor, engineers, teachers, everyone has a different number. However, the farmers' rate is different. So if you look, if you're being a country, a important person, policy maker, you always look how the life of the people are developing with the increase of the wages and all this stuff. So do you think that this is a main factor where they are finding that farming cannot bring much, and on the other hand, they don't have much rise as compared to the other profession? Did you find the same thing?
I think you've hit the issue right on the head, actually. In recent discussions with the agricultural industry, the status of a farmer has been reduced to almost a labouring status. And it's a shame in many ways, because they're really businessmen, and they've got to manage a business, and the educational qualifications have been taken away to a degree from the farmer as well.
Yeah,
I'm saying they can't get degrees in that, but the status is not there, and of course this control of the market price, whether or not government should be involved in that or let the market forces control it. Here in Australia, the dairy industry is very upset, and the bread industry and the wheat industry, because you can buy a couple of litres of milk for $1, and the dairyman saying, yeah, but I can't even produce it for $1.
Yes.
And the wheat people saying, you're selling bread for $1 a loaf. I can't even produce the wheat for $1 to go into the bread. So who's making the money? And certainly the farmers aren't seeing the money. Perhaps the corporate farming community, in other words, the larger organisations, are seeing that, but not the traditional family farmer. And I think they've perhaps lost their status, and I think the city has lost its connection to the country. I agree with Dr. Bernard that I grew up, my father was a farmer, my wife's parents were farmers, but we now live in a city. I certainly grow some vegetables in my little garden patch, but not enough to feed me for all year. It's usually for a meal or two every week if I'm lucky. But I have to rely on the farmers, and even tonight's news indicated that certain vegetable prices are going up because they can't get pickers in Australia. The backpackers were the pickers, and now they can't get the pickers, and they've had to increase the price to get labourers to come out and pick the fruit and vegetables, which means that we'll be paying an extra $1 a kilo for certain vegetables and fruit over the next couple of months.
Yeah, that was my second question also. Luckily, you already mentioned about the pickers, because at one stage we believe that the government is not giving values to the farmers. On the second side, we know that in immigration there is a special visas for the pickers, cherry pickers, and there is especially for the students, if they are doing the picker job, there is a special privilege for the working hours also. So do you think that government is really looking after at some way, or this is because they have the shortage of the workers?
Look, here in Australia, they've relied heavily on international people from the islands, predominantly.
Yeah.
in one area that Dr. Bernard and I went to, most of the management of farms were Indian people who are highly successful in India and manage farms at a much reduced price compared to an Australian farm manager. And backpackers basically are allowed to make money on their visas, and they can usually get it at a much lower tax level. But at the moment, backpackers aren't allowed here in Australia because of COVID. So they're trying to get university students and TAFE students during their breaks to go and work on the farms, and offering them incentives through their fees that they've got to pay. So they're looking at alternatives for that.
Temporary.
So that's currently what's happening here.
Yeah, they are looking at temporary. Malik Saab, before I'm moving to Professor Pittman, I mentioned that, okay, could you explain with us that how these protests, we are talking about the parliament passed bill and we are talking about the protest. Do you think that there is a possibility, or we have to just pray to the God and wait for some good time?
Look, all these governments that are supposedly democratically elected and have leaders that care about people's opinion always go and change, because there is no ego system in democracy.
Good.
It is people's voice. If you are a dictator, you don't care, and if there is an issue, you oppress the resistance to what you want to do. India, I always pride, is one of the most successful democracy and is world's biggest democracy. We have never had a coup there. Prime ministers and the rulers of the time have always listened to people. In this one, we are finding it really strange. Though they call themselves democratically elected, but for last 15 days or 90 days, they have not listened. They have paid no attention to these people's plight. Will anything change? Not sure, considering their attitude. Should things change? Yes. Because currently, India's name all over the world is being malignant. Everybody looks at India and says, wow, this is what's happening. This is how they treat their farmers. And government, which is the guardian of country's good name, should react to it right away. When heads of the state, you have demonstrations happening in every city in the world, considering Indians and Punjabis are everywhere. And then what is more funny is when Sikhs are protesting there, they call them, oh, they're Khalistanis. They're protesting it.
Yeah, it happened.
What's wrong with it? I see it's fine. If Sikhs wants to protest, and they are the people who have led the country during freedom struggle, they are the people who are leading the country now, let it be. When we had the demonstrations last year during December, exactly same time, against NCR, National Citizens Register, then Muslims who were badly affected came out and they said, oh, these are terrorists. No democratically elected leader or the party would call their own citizens with names. This shamefully is a very bad example that our current government is putting forward. They must respect, okay, there's nothing personal, Mr. Modi. If these laws are displeasing your citizens, undo them, repeal what you have done and move on. And he says, oh, these are for the benefit of farmers. Well, I'm sorry, the farmers are there in Delhi, there to thank you for bringing such a good law, right? You have over 1 million farmers sitting there for so many days, trying to tell you, no, sir, we are unhappy with what you have done. Please change them. So this stubborn, insensitive, and indifferent attitude of the government is not getting any sympathy all over the world.
Right. I believe what you are expecting, what the people are expecting, what they make the efforts. I believe that I wish also that it might get back and they will have the bill to be withdrawn. And ultimately, Malik Saab, do you think that if you look the start of our program, we compare the US, China, let's say, okay, US, India, China #1, India #2, US #3. US using the best technologies, China using the best technology. India side, we still believe that government is trying to make some changes from the financial side, making the farmer weak. However, they did not do anything from the technology side. Do you think that they are doing quite good for the technology side for the farmers in India?
It depends from state to state. When you say India, India has, I think, 29 states. And all the states are not technologically very advanced. And that is why I said when West was going for industrial revolution, we went for agricultural revolution, the green revolution. And what we slowly did was we established research institutes and universities in every state. Depending on the size of the state and population, more than one agriculture universities were established. And if you see in Punjab, where I come from, it has the highest, absolutely the highest yields and lowest cost for rice and wheat. Absolutely lowest cost. So highest yield per hectare.
Right.
So yes, we have used the technology to maximize the produce and reduce the cost.
So that technology introduced by themselves, the farmers, by them, their interest, they pay from their side, or it was introduced by the government with a special package, these technologies?
Generally by the government and of course supported by the industry.
Right. Professor Grant, honest opinion, you already mentioned just now that your father and your wife's fathers were farmers, but Professor Grant Pittman is a professor. Now, honest speaking, honest opinion, what I like to know and share with my viewers that now you are not the farmers, you are first generation, your father generation was farmer. Do you really believe that first of all, do you think that it's a big change? And if it is big and good change, it should be applied most of the places. So it means that slowly we have to move from the farmer to the different professions. And however you are feeling with your fingerprints, how your father behaved with being a farmer and what you believe on the farmings.
My father had to leave the farm because of a depression and because of a natural disaster that destroyed the farm. And my wife's relatives had to leave because of poverty. They couldn't make the farm make enough money for a living. So they have similar circumstances to probably the small individual farms of India. I certainly like to get my hands dirty and grow crops, and I have for many years had little gardens. But I think the problem is the city and the country need a synergism. When you're dealing with farmers, they understand the natural laws of water and land and soil and growing crops. We in the city don't understand that. All we see is the fruit or the vegetables or whatever. We don't sometimes appreciate that someone had to plant it, they had to put fertilizer on it, they had to water it. So I think we have lost the connection to understanding where the food comes from and its production and how it arrives on my dinner plate, which I ate tonight. And how do you do that? I think through education and also allowing farmers to be seen as part of the wider experience that we go through in life. And that's done by allowing them, I think, a fair voice in the political arena and to reduce the unwise policy decision made by a bureaucrat in a place like Canberra, which is miles away from farms, to let the farmer have the freedom to decide what's best to grow and to help. And the marketplace will tell you that if everyone likes to eat rice, we need rice. Governments are telling us when to sow, when to reap. Next, they'll be telling us when to cook the bread.
Right. Malik Saab, he mentioned about the education is one of the major factor which can play a major role. We discussed about that your education system was involved also promoting the farming, agro business, agricultural bachelor? What exactly, how does it work? And because I like to know how the education is related with the farming here.
Look, the farmers had to be educated regarding what seeds to buy, when to grow, how to grow, the timing being a very critical factor, because let's say you wanted to grow paddy and you grew paddy right away before the monsoon came. So you had to get water out of the ground. And so your groundwater table depleted. They went down, down, down. What to do in terms of after your harvesting is done, how to take it. Professor Pittman is president of Leaders Institute that specializes in agriculture and intends to, or rather envisions to be a university in coming decade. Having said that, yes, education and research played a major part. I still remember there were research centers from where people were deputed to go and meet farmers. Kisan Melas were done. Farmer carnivals were done where Kisans were brought in, new seeds, better producing seeds were introduced. So government had always been proactive from the point of view how to get the maximum yield at minimum cost. But I also want to mention here with what is going on in India, government has been excellent and has been greatly instrumental in terms of India's green revolution. But tomorrow is 8th of December.
Yeah.
Because government has been insensitive and indifferent to their demand, they are doing Bharat Bandh. The whole of India is being shut down tomorrow.
It is because of to support the farmers?
Support the farmers, and the labor unions have come out with farmer support.
So it's a big form of the referendum against their decision. I think that's a very clear message from the people.
That's right. That's right. And what I am seeing on social media is it's receiving spontaneous support. All the parties have come out, all the labor unions have come out, all the Kisan unions, the farming unions have come out, and people who are not related anyway to the industry have come out. People are voluntarily shutting down their businesses tomorrow to make a statement. So it's going to be a massive statement to the government. It is not that anybody wants to obstruct something. I think this would turn out to be the most peaceful bandh ever done, because people are feeling for it.
So tomorrow is going to be the Bharat Day. So ultimately, it might be the biggest peaceful protest against this here. Right. Professor Pittman, another, because you've been, again, you involved in the policy statement, making the policy and procedure. What, let's say, if somebody allow you or you have authority to make a policy for the farm, for a policy which help the country and the farmers, what is missing from the chain? What is missing?
Look, I think, and I probably refer to an American Secretary of Agriculture from the 50s and 60s called Asad Benson, who was considered the foremost authority in this policy area for government in America. And the Americans now have an act called the Freedom to Farm Act. And he said there are 3 ingredients where unwise governments get involved, including technology and science. And he said policy shouldn't interfere in the freedom to farm. In other words, allow the farmers to decide the policy, not the government. The second one was don't interfere in profit and efficiencies. Help the farmers become profiteers and efficient. And the third area that government shouldn't get involved in policy is dealing with the expansion of the free market. In other words, if rice is a free market, don't interfere in it. Let it grow.
Let it grow.
And allow the wise use of abundance. Now, I'm not sure about it is abundance, but there are countries that have great abundance, and to use it wisely And I think Dr. Bernard talked about the United Nations charters on sustainability, dealing with poverty and food sustainability. There's a great opportunity for countries that have abundance to do what the Americans call food for peace, where if countries are trying to live in a peaceful way, then the abundance from those countries outside of their area can be used to help them.
Right. Mr. Malik, Professor Pittman mentioned about the involvement of the state with the farmers farming. In other words, he also mentioned that if the farmers are there, then how these things can happen, or there is no process, the farmer cannot be in parliament.
If you go and look up the biodata of all the MPs and ministers,
farmers,
everybody would write farmers and social workers. And some of them have never been to a farm. You know what happens in our countries. It happens in every country. Here in the US, farmers will do the politicians will do whatever it gets them elected. And there are only very few honest politicians. And I deal with a lot of these honest and good, hardworking, well-meaning politicians. And they are the ones who make the countries great over here and even in India and US. Good people that join politics, serve for a little while and move on. What happens in our countries, you have career politicians. They stay there forever. And after some time, they have nothing new to offer. So what they do, the only way is they would do some danga, some demonstration, something, they'll break some road or put something to get people excited. Most of the time, these people don't have a constructive agenda. And you should look at the manifestos these people present. Half of them themselves don't know what's the full form of MLA or MP. And I was reading somewhere in our lovely neighborhood, Pakistan, they made, I think, a bachelor's degree as one of the qualifications, which I thought was wonderful. India should adopt that. You should get only educated politicians. But then our people get creative. They buy degrees. And half of them are fake, including our Prime Minister's masters. He came out and said, I did a master's degree. And then when people insisted, after some time, he came out with a degree that was printed on computer, which he got awarded in 1976. There were no computers in 1976. For God's sake, India did not have computers in 1976, and those universities had no access to computers. So that's what we become creative. So yes, there are farmers, but regardless of what I'm trying to say, you can have a consultative approach to forming a law. You can consult these farmers, and especially when your country, when I say your country, when India has 58% of Indians depending on farming for their livelihood. It's a major chunk of the country.
Absolutely.
And 58% of country's population is more than in entire Europe and South Pacific and all these countries. Probably 30 countries, 40 countries population put together is less than the 58% of our population there.
Right.
So unless government has its own private agenda, they should have, if it was for the welfare of people and welfare of larger section of the society and welfare of the targeted society of farmers, they should have consulted all the stakeholders. And there was no hurry to pass these laws.
Right. Now, consulting the farmers, Professor Pittman, and as he already mentioned that most of the politicians, they say they're farmers. In our system, in Australian system, when they are making the farming policy, does they considering the farmers' approach, their value, their requirement, or few of the farmers are allowed to be a part of the politics, like on the quota basis, like in our country, if the party has, let's say, major seats, they can still select some people without election to be part of the parliament for the decision.
Australia and the States have had farming political parties. generally called the Country Party initially, and eventually became the National Party. So the farmers have had been involved in politics as a united group from about the 1890s, almost 130 years. So they've had a strong voice in Parliament. However, and my state, Queensland, which had a very strong farming background until about the 1970s, 1980s, when mining opened up, I analysed every politician's background from 1960 to 1990. And when I looked at the Country Party, now called the National Party, practically all of them were farmers when you started in 1960. By the time you got to 1990, majority of them weren't. They were lawyers, they were accountants, they were school teachers, they were every other industry. They lived in the country area, but they weren't farmers. Our current Deputy Prime Minister comes from a farming background, but the previous one was an accountant. So the problem they've got with the farming political party is that it's losing some of its dirty hands, getting its hands dirty in the soil. It's more professional people who live in the country area who try to become the voice of the farmer, but they don't have an appreciation of what the farmer's really doing. I don't believe anyway.
Right. Mr. Malik, we have just last two questions, and this is a little bit different. Let's say the farming bills came just to control, because that's the way the systems I saw in my life, that's the way the system comes. The bill came, they got the administrative control, and then slowly they do whatever they like to do it. Okay. Do you really think, because that's the point where I believe that we have the weakest area from the Indian farmers, that they can't have approach to utilize the advanced technology within the system? You already mentioned in different states is different, but I still believe that there is a long way remaining. So if the government has a control, they have still a strong power to introduce that advanced technology by force.
Look, I salute government's initiatives in technology development, especially in India. Government has done yeoman's job.
Yeoman's job.
Yeah. I don't think there are issues with the government not trying to develop technology and not trying to develop the latest seeds that will have highest yield and not trying to educate the farmers. I think government has gone out of its way. It's not easy to feed 1.3 billion people. You're feeding 1/4, I mean, it used to be 1/4, now it's probably 1/8 of world's population without problem. We never have starvation deaths in India.
Yes.
Right. So that's a big credit to Indian government. They have done excellent job when it comes to farming and technology advancement, developing your own, cutting the cost. Please understand, most of our farmers are poor farmers in terms of their ownership of the land. 4 or 5 acres can't get them to spare any money that they could contribute. So government came out, they established a campaign system, a cadre-based system for the farmers to be educated. People were deputed to go to these farmers, meet them, conduct small farmer fairs, Kisan Melas, a number of places everywhere, come out with cheaper cost of machinery, farming machinery that you could buy, and also evolve new laws in banking where farmers were supported with money. Success doesn't come easy. So government had ticked all the boxes to make sure that our farming sector is successful, other than this time.
Right. Because what was I was thinking in a part B question that maybe the government is thinking that we'd like to introduce the advanced technology system, but because of the old concept which every system has, they don't like to engage or use the facility. So they always because of their comfort zone, they always go with the same way and they are not utilizing. So maybe the government would like to control first and then introduce the technology.
Yes and no. Generally, people don't have a choice. They're poor farmers. They're happy to adopt anything that helps them grow their produce better.
Right.
Minimize the losses. Having said that, this time government really has acted and was not aware of the pulse of people.
That's good, because I'd like to see the other side of Professor Pittman. Do you think that it's again a tricky question for both of you, that in this era, your kids, my kids, our generation is not, especially the young generation, not like to be a farmer? Why?
Sorry, I missed your question.
In our era, our generation, the coming generation are not interested to be a farmer. It's a policy failure. It's a system failure. Where is lagging?
You should have attended the meeting I was at last Friday. A lot of retired scientists and academics and teachers felt that this younger generation is struggling to understand farming and have no interest in farming. And they were looking at what is available to teach this next generation about farming. I don't think there's any easy solutions for that, but certainly Dr. Bernard and myself believe that you've got to provide educational institutions that have the specialisation or the specialty of agricultural business, to show that it's not just the farmer, it's a business. It has an ability to deliver wealth, prosperity, food, reduce hunger, and reduce poverty. But more so, it can give huge amounts of employment. And I think government policy needs to think not only about assisting the farmer, but having people understand the benefits of farming. And our recent election here in Queensland had a proposal called the Bradford system, where they were going to increase the water flow into central Queensland to support the tropical agricultural industry. But they never explained how that would benefit the farmers or how it would benefit young people's jobs opportunities or education or anything. It was that we were going to pump more water over the Great Divide into farms. They didn't explain it. And I think that's one of the weaknesses in when you're dealing with government policies. They fail to explain how the person on the street can benefit from those agricultural policies.
Professor, I was just trying to compare the US, China and India about the farming. So I find it out in few surveys and few reports that China introduced latest technology from the system, and that's create an interest. And look at, they are most of the country dying in farming, and China is developing in farming. So if this factor is a, it's one of the main fact which can enhance the farming. Do you think that the government has to keep some funds, major funds, to introduce that advanced technology system where the machinery, robotic system will work, and it create an interest for the young generation to be a farmer?
They found here in Australia, when they sacked all the airline pilots, they couldn't get jobs, but they found that the huge harvesting units out west, which had high technology in it, the pilots could operate them very successfully, and most of the pilots are a younger generation. But having said that, certainly we are dealing with scientists who suggest that you don't necessarily need technology. What you need to do is understand the environment. And we were displayed some videos of what's occurred in the Egyptian area over in Saudi Arabia, where how you can use nature to grow food and trees and plants and grass. So sometimes it doesn't actually require technology. you've actually got all the resources. It's how you manage the natural environment you're actually in.
Right, right. Malik Saab, the last question, and it's a difficult. It's off the subject. You are a businessman, and as I already mentioned a few times, that overall, if you see the rate of the wages of the all skilled educated peoples are increased drastically, but not for the farmers. But what do you think that what can be done where the farmer's life can be not exactly but comparatively equal as benefit or have the equal values towards the rest of the professions?
Look, I think to some extent this corporate farming is going to help these farmers. But that system, it's not like one size fits all. In India, it's not going to help because farmers first are very attached to their land. See what happens in PNG. Landowners would die for their land.
Why?
It's the sentimental attachment to the land you have. So we have to invent a better system to increase the income farmers have. And this government came out and said, oh, we'll double your farming income. What's happening is instead of doubling, turning them into slaves, into their own, slaves of their own farms. They will work hard and not have enough to eat and can't support a lifestyle. You mentioned about China. I think China is a bad example to compare. Their business model is flawed.
Fraud.
Yes. Please understand, in a democratic country, you have to respect the individual freedom of a laborer. There are different set of laws that are applied. In China, there is no freedom. So China is a bad business model to be compared to any of our democratic countries, whether it's India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, or America or Australia.
Definitely, definitely. The reason for the China is ultimately, we call it hit and trial method. Somebody done something and we'll see that how that method is applicable. I know that how the China's system works, but again, its things are getting day by day different, very differently, ultimately. Malik Saab, do you like to add anything at the stage, or Professor Grant, you like to add anything? Because we have a lot of questions, but again, the time is almost, we cross our time. You like to add anything? Or I can just close out.
Mr. Zaidi, to thank you for this program. I think there are a lot of passions involved in today's program, considering what is happening to 1.4 billion people in India and around the world. People are very passionate. I just hope and pray that government listens to these farmers. There is no ego here with the government and shouldn't be there. Regardless of what, they should be listened. That's the democracy.
Absolutely.
And if they can't change the law, sit down with them and negotiate an amicable settlement.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Pittman, you like to add anything, sir?
I think one of the critical issues in India, and it occurs here in Australia and America and probably China too, is they didn't get any voice in the legislation. They didn't get heard. And yes, usually, at least if you've got a hearing and you can present your views, you tolerate what the government does. And I like a quote that this Ezra Teth Benson said, that the farms of United States cannot be run from a desk in Washington.
Yes, yes.
In other words, it can't be run from Delhi and it can't be run from Canberra. You've got to go and talk to them.
Amen.
Yeah, so let's close at the dua that farms cannot be run from the parliament, and Dr. Bernard said Amin, and I also like to add Amin, and I know that Professor Grant Pittman is also similar to us, so he will also say Amin. Thank you, viewers. I think it's over from Shib Reddy. I believe that today's topic, our farmers is our future. It was a debate, and I try to get difficult answers from both experts to see that it's true that our farmers is our future. And I believe the way they explain, the way they shows, and the stats they explain, it says that yes, our farmers are our future. Definitely, because we can't see. But as Dr. Bernard and Professor Pittman says that when you don't get the banana, when you don't get the bread, you will really going to learn within a day that why these things are happening and why 72 News, Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Grant Pittman are spending their time to discuss the good time or what is the future of a format. It's over from Shoaib Zaidi. See you next Monday with some other topic with our two honorable guests, Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Pittman. Thank you very much, sir. It's over from Shoaib Zaidi. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.